Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots Monday Morning, where we go over the Sunday morning news shows that we watch so that you don't have to. I'm Katie Halper.
And I'm Aaron Maté. How are you, Katie?
I'm good. You?
I'm great. I'm great. Another exciting Monday morning full of lots of big news this week. We had
Lots of news.
we had a
Yep.
prisoner swap with Russia.
Oh, yeah.
We had
Spoiler
Kirsten
alert.
Sinema leaving the Democratic Party and becoming independent, and a lot of
Another
hot
spoiler
reactions.
alert. A lot of hot reactions. And everyone, if you're watching this, you know what to do. Like the stream. Also, tweet it out. Aaron, make sure you tweet it out. Useful Idiots, make sure you tweet it out. Viewers, make sure you tweet it out. And you know what else you can do is join us at the hottest and hardest, as in we go hard, after party at 11 a.m. happening anywhere in the world. And that is, of course, the call-in that we do afterwards, where we take your calls and answer your questions. I think that's right. All the announcements, right?
I think that's it. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Should we get to it? Now, this week, we usually start with a recap from Chuck Todd, but this week the recaps didn't. There wasn't much cooking. Yeah. So let's go right to one of the biggest news items, which is Kirsten Sinema of Arizona, talking about her decision to formally leave the Democratic Party and be an independent.
Yeah. Now this is an interview from Jake Tapper. It was not done on Sunday morning, but it was previewed on the Sunday morning shows thusly. So we're going to show that, just so you know we're not cheating.
Your voting record and the issues that are important to you, as spelled out on your website, most of them are traditional Democratic issues, capital D, expanding healthcare access, abortion rights, LGBTQ rights, path for dreamers, and on, environmentalism, green energy. That sounds like a Democrat to me, no?
Well, I know this is really hard for lots of folks, especially in DC. But what's important to me is to not be tethered by the partisanship that dominates politics today. And I think Americans are tired of it. I think Arizonans are tired of it. What I'm interested in is working on all those issues that you just mentioned, that I care deeply about, and that I believe my constituents care deeply about. But I want to work on them in a way that is productive, that is free from the trappings of the pull of the political system. You know, the national political parties have pulled our politics farther to the edges than I've ever seen. I want to remove some of that, kind of that poison from our politics. I want to get back to actually just working on the issues, working together to try and solve these challenges.
So that's why she's leaving, guys. Apparently, she's leaving because she's tired of the partisanship. She doesn't want to be tethered to a party. She wants to work on issues. But let's see if we hear an alternative explanation from Bernard Sanders as to why she left.
You are an independent. She is now the third official independent of the U.S. Senate, joining you and Angus King of Maine. What do you think of her decision, and also what you just heard in her interview with Jake?
I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on Senator Sinema. She has her reasons. Donna, I happen to suspect that it's probably a lot to do with politics back in Arizona. I think the Democrats there are not all that enthusiastic about somebody who helps sabotage some of the most important legislation that protects the interests of working families and voting rights and so forth. So I think it really has to do with her political aspirations for the future in Arizona. But for us, I think nothing much has changed in terms of the functioning of the U.S. Senate. The good news is that we now have 51 votes. We'll have a majority on committees. It means that we can go forward and start protecting the interests of working families and deal with the reality that we are increasingly living in an oligarchy where the billionaire class and large corporations control almost every aspect of our country. So I would hope very much that with this new majority, Democrats will sit down and start fighting for the needs of ordinary Americans.
So I want to talk about some of those issues in a second. But first, you were a very important figure on the campaign trail for progressives ahead of the midterms, as you normally are. I'm sure you're going to be campaigning for candidates in 2024. The outgoing Arizona Democratic Party official, one of them says that he expects Democrats will run their own candidate against her. Is that a good idea? Would you support a Democratic opponent against Senator Sinema?
I support progressive candidates all over this country, people who have the guts to take on powerful special interests. I don't know what's going to be happening in Arizona. We'll see who they nominate, but certainly that's something I will take a hard look at.
Does she have the guts to take on powerful special interests?
No, she doesn't. She is a corporate Democrat who has, in fact, along with Senator Manchin, sabotaged enormously important legislation.
So there you have it. That's the reason. It's probably internal politics. Who knows what the reason is? It's definitely not because she's sick of partisanship. She, of course, remember famously in that amazing moment, she gave the thumbs down when people were voting on raising the minimum wage, which was great. I kind of love that. She did it. She looked like a cheerleader when she did it. She looked like a teenager. And it was a great moment. And shout out to Bernie Sanders also for making sure to include Joe Manchin in his attack, because now he can't be accused of sexism, although he will be accused of sexism. But it's nice to say out there. So many people, if they were asked if she had the guts to take on corporate power, they'd say, I'm not going to comment on that. But he just says it. It's nice.
Sinema also was like I think she was the main culprit in killing a tax hike on really wealthy people last summer. And that was after she got more than $1 million from Wall Street. So it's not difficult to see why Bernie is calling her out. I love when she talked about how both parties are pulling us to the edges as if she represents some sort of sensible center. That's always what the line is when you're trying to cast yourself as some kind of maverick, is like you're in the middle, when she's on the extreme when it comes to so many issues, including regulating Wall Street and giving people decent wages, like when she killed a minimum wage hike. But people like that always want to seem as if they're like the sensible ones and not on the edge, not
on the edge, and not being political. Like they're just good, committed to the issues. Also, Jake Tapper is a little stupid of him to talk about the issues on her website. I mean, everyone has issues on their website that they don't necessarily fight for.
Well, yeah, everyone's guilty of that.
Everyone's guilty of that, yeah.
Including those on the edge, like people in the squad who once claimed to be against militarism, but now vote for the Ukraine proxy war. So that everyone's guilty of that. All right. Well, the other big news this week was the prisoner swap, in which Victor Bout, who's a Russian arms dealer who dealt a lot of weapons and was sentenced to many years in prison in the U.S., he was swapped for WNBA star Brittany Griner. So here is Meet the Press covering this, and Chuck Todd is speaking to Preet Bharara, the former New York District Attorney, and let's hear what he says.
Start with what you can tell us about Victor Bout. How dangerous of a man is he?
Dangerous man. I don't know who that young guy was you had on the screen a moment ago.
He looked good. He said promising future.
I don't recognize that
promising future in television and radio.
Look, everyone is happy, if you're an American or not an American, that Brittany Griner, who is, I think, unfairly and illegitimately detained in Russia, is back home with her family. We're happy for her. We're happy for her family. At the same time, you might imagine that not as just a general prosecutor, but the prosecutor who oversaw the prosecution and conviction of Victor Bout has a view about how dangerous a person he was. He's, as you said, someone who was convicted at trial by unanimous jury of conspiracy to kill Americans. He was convicted of conspiracy to provide material support to terrorists. He's on tape with confidential informants, planning to sell hundreds of surface-to-air missiles to the FARC, also sell 30,000 AK-47s to the FARC for the stated purpose of shooting down American helicopters in Colombia. So he's a dangerous man then. I don't know how dangerous he is now.
Right.
Presumably, I have a lot of respect and trust in the Biden administration, is his ability to engage in trafficking of armaments at a time when Russia is at war with Ukraine. Is it diminished? Is he operational still possibly? I don't know the answers to those questions.
Right.
But I think people of good faith can, in good faith, ask questions and be concerned about it even when we're very, very happy that Brittany Griner is back in the U.S.?
So I personally doubt he's still operational if he's been in prison in the U.S. for the last several years. But
You
I mean,
never
who knows?
know.
Maybe he's that good, or he can
Yeah.
still deal in from a U.S. federal prison. But what these shows don't mention is, well, first of all, a couple of things. The judge in Bout's case gave him a very low sentence, like
Right.
way less than what prosecutors were going for. I don't know the details of the case, but I think that's because the judge wasn't convinced of the case against him. But whatever happened there, what doesn't get mentioned on these shows is that Bout actually worked for the U.S. In Iraq. So let's go to this article from ABC News from 2008 and look at the headline. Arrested arms dealers' planes flew U.S. missions in Iraq. When U.S. officials announced the arrest of a notorious arms dealer and drug runner this afternoon, the fact that his planes flew U.S. supply missions in Iraq will likely go unmentioned. They're talking about Victor Bout here. And let's just go down to a few more paragraphs. And at the time he was flying in Iraq, Bout was already a wanted international fugitive. Intelligence officials had considered Bout one of the greatest threats to U.S. interests in the same league as al-Qaeda kingpin Osama bin Laden. Interpol had issued a warrant for his arrest. The UN Security Council had restricted his travel. But that didn't stop the U.S. government contractors from paying Bout-controlled firms roughly $60 million to fly supplies into Iraq in support of the U.S. war effort, according to a book released last year. This was again in 2008. And it didn't prevent the U.S. military from giving Bout's pilots millions of dollars in free airplane fuel while they were flying U.S. supply flights. So not long before he was arrested for gun running, he was gun running for the U.S. And all of that, as far as I could tell, was unmentioned yet in the coverage of Victor Bout's freedom in this prisoner swap.
Yeah. It's always interesting how the news gets curated.
And it's just so funny that, like, on all the issues where the U.S. needs to, where people in media need to express indignation and, oh, I can't believe we released this horrible person, there's always something to implicate the U.S.
Right.
and to embarrass the U.S. and to show it up for its hypocrisy about how terrible gun running is when it was using this guy to gun run in Iraq. To the tune of $60 million. His firm got $60 million. His firm's got $60 million to fly weapons for the U.S. in Iraq.
Yeah. Well, let's, now that we know that, the next clip is especially poignant. Let's hear what Mike Pompeo had to say about it.
For joining us today. I want to talk to you about this report by John Bolton, the former colleague of yours in the Trump administration, who says that there was talk of a boot for Whelan trade under the Trump administration. You were CIA director, you were Secretary of State. Certainly you would have to know about those discussions. Is that true? And why wasn't the deal made?
Shannon, great to be with you. Thanks for having me on. I don't want to talk about the private conversations we had. Ambassador Bolton's free to say whatever he might like, but we were very focused on getting Paul Whelan out, every American back home. There was nothing in my time in service that was as joyous as returning Americans home to their family. We got 3 Americans out of North Korea. I got to fly back with them. It was remarkable.
But close second was when I sanctioned every country that I want to overthrow even more. That was pretty joyous when I got to deny food and medicine to Iranian children. That was pretty great.
And you know what else was pretty great was when I spitballed how to kill Julian Assange.
Yeah, that was pretty
also beautiful.
Yeah.
He sounds like there's something erotic in the way he describes it.
He definitely has that quality of, or I should say that the characteristic of speaking in really kind of aroused terms when he's speaking about sadism.
Yeah.
He loves, like, when he's talking about like trying to overthrow the government of Venezuela and imposing crippling sanctions, he gets really excited.
Yeah.
This is definitely what gets him going.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna actually rewind a couple seconds so we can watch him. Trigger alert, gets a little aroused.
In service that was as joyous as returning Americans home. Not every American back home. There was nothing in my time in service that was as joyous as returning Americans home to their family. We got 3 Americans out of North Korea. I got to fly back with them. It was remarkable. We got Pastor Brunson out.
I also got to kill some kids in Syria and Venezuela when I denied them cancer medicine. That was pretty great too.
That was pretty good. It was wonderful.
And I'm glad Brittany Griner's back home too. They were able to accomplish this. But my mission was always to get every American back, but at the same time not create the risk that more Americans would be taken. And there is no doubt that today, not just Vladimir Putin, but all the bad guys, the Iranians, others who hold Americans in detention, see that if you take a celebrity, the chance of getting one of your bad guys back out of American control is greater. And I think for people out there of notoriety, it is more likely they will be taken hostage today, and that is not a good policy.
The classic celebrity for bad guy trade.
I know.
Classic move for the Russian playbook.
Yeah, straight out of the Russian playbook. Yeah.
All right.
Or,
well,
it's out of the playbook for any of the bad guys, the Iranians, the Chinese, the Russians.
Absolutely. Well, this is a theme also picked up on by former White House expert Fiona Hill, who also served in the Trump administration. She said a similar thing on Face the Nation about how basically moves like this will encourage the bad guys to kidnap our famous Americans and force through more prisoner swaps. So this is what Fiona Hill said.
It has become an attack point from Republicans, including the House.
Oh, yeah, right. No, sorry. I thought we had the wrong clip. We have the right clip. My bad.
Republican leader, that this swap took place for a Marine veteran left behind. But Fiona, you're making the point that that Marine veteran was left behind. He was captured during the Trump administration. So you're arguing this is just disingenuous outcry, essentially.
Look, what we have to bear in mind, as in the previous segment brought to the fore, is we have a lot of American citizens who are being taken by other countries for political purposes.
President Biden called it a national emergency.
That's absolutely right. And as Chris is saying, every single American citizen who travels abroad, even look in allied and partner countries, if you get into trouble, there's only so much that the United States government can do for you. And when it is a state like Russia or Iran or China or North Korea, I mean, some of them are more obvious than others, you are putting yourself at a certain degree of risk, even if you think you are just basically going either for tourist purposes or to visit family or for something routine. Remember, Trevor Reed was going to visit his girlfriend. Paul Whelan was going to a wedding. And Brittany Griner was doing something that many other athletes do around the world, including Russian athletes here in the United States. If we think of Ovechkin, for example, playing one of the greatest hockey players here in the United States, playing for a Washington-based team, they were doing something that seemed routine, seemed completely ordinary, but found themselves snarled up in basically political games. And we have to be mindful of the fact that when governments do this, they're doing it for trading purposes, but they're also doing it to mess about in our politics. And we are falling every single time for this. The more that we fight with each other, the more that we play into their hands. And we also risk other Americans being taken because it's a way of influencing our domestic politics.
Messing around. Sorry.
Those evil baddies, they're stealing our people and they're messing in our domestic politics. And Adam Schiff, the outgoing chair of the House Intelligence Committee, picked up on this theme as well.
Can I just say one thing that's interesting before we move on? It would be appropriate for the anchors to bring up the treatment that we subject people to in this country for very petty drug offenses. But of course, that would require some critical thinking and pushback.
Yes. Yeah, because Brittany Griner was arrested because she had some
hemp oil.
Some hemp oil.
Yeah.
Yes. And I wonder if we have any experience with locking up people for draconian sentences for having a possession of a small amount of drugs. Of course, but yes, as you say, that doesn't get mentioned. But there's another aspect of hypocrisy to this too, and that's the fact that we kidnap a lot of people around the world too for political purposes. And but Adam Schiff seemed to miss this when he spoke.
Putin also did say more swaps are possible, which of course raises hope for Paul Whelan. But as you just said, you believe this trade does incentivize hostage taking. It puts a higher price on the head of your average American, and certainly an American celebrity, as Brittany Griner was.
I think all Americans have to realize that whenever they go to a place like Russia or Iran or North Korea, that they stand the chance of being grabbed for no reason at all except to be used as a political chip. And it ought to make all of us think long and hard before going to these places. These are despotic regimes that have no view of the sanctity of human life or human rights, and they will do whatever they need to do. And the Biden administration is moving forward to try to sanction those that are involved in this kind of hostage taking, but that only goes so far in the best of circumstances.
Okay, has anybody heard of Julian Assange? Anybody? Can I get Julian Assange? out there. Has he possibly been kidnapped for political purposes for the act of committing journalism? And
but you know what? When he was kidnapped, the political purpose was democracy,
right? Yes.
Freedom, liberty.
Yes, all those good things. Yes, and how about Alex Saab, someone who gets zero attention in establishment media, but he's a Venezuelan diplomat who a few years ago, during the Trump term, he was flying through Cape Verde on a mission to try to basically get to buy food for his country, because his country was then under harsher U.S. sanctions because the Trump administration was trying to overthrow the Venezuelan government. So Alex Saab is a Venezuelan diplomat flying around the world to try to basically buy food, find a way to buy food for his country. And he stops in Cape Verde. And because of heavy U.S. pressure on the government, like bribery and coercion, and even putting a U.S. military hangar, like a ship nearby to intimidate the government, Alex Saab was kidnapped. He was taken off of his plane and arrested, held in prison, and then extradited to the U.S., where he's now in prison in Florida. And actually, the trial is going on this week. And people don't know about him because he gets no attention. But that was a case of just outright kidnapping for a political purpose, because Alex Saab was committing the crime of trying to feed his country's people and break U.S. sanctions, which you're not allowed to do. And by the way, U.S. sanctions are another way of holding an entire country hostage, not in a prison, but by denying them of the basics they need to survive. And so he was trying to break that. And for that, he was kidnapped, extradited, and imprisoned, and now prosecuted in the U.S.
Right. And then there's, of course, Mumia Abu-Jamal, Leonard Peltier, Daniel Hale. We're very well-rounded when it comes to our political prisoners. It's like a rainbow. We don't discriminate. We have very diverse. Also, sorry, I had said hemp oil. I meant hash oil about Brittany.
Okay, so speaking of Russia, we have more insight on this from Chris Krebs, who has more to say about how somehow this prisoner swap plays into the culture wars of America. Let's hear what he has to say.
He's very insightful always. Great hair too.
Talking about, Chris, the spin around this that has really electrified the political body in this country.
Well, Putin's very much tapped into the culture wars here. He understands the various levers and divisions that exist in American society. And, given the fact that Russia does not have a whole lot going on, their military clearly is underperforming on the field in Ukraine. Economically, they are a bit of a, has been. This is one of the few areas that Putin still has influence and ability to shape the global narratives. And so this is one of those things where I think Americans traveling and as abroad, as soon as you leave the United States, you have to be very mindful of how you may fit into these information battles back and forth.
Mindful.
So
we need to apply mindfulness.
Yeah. So what does that mean? Like, should we not talk about the issue because Russian propaganda is maybe exploiting it? Should we just go on TV and just stay silent the whole time?
Yeah, actually, I think we should maybe take this whole video down.
That'd be cool if one of these shows did like a hour-long show of silence just to fight Russian propaganda, because
that would be
talking about the issues will play into Russia. So just go on TV and be mute for an hour. I think that would be valuable.
Yeah. Just put like a piece of tape over the mouth.
Yeah. It's amazing what the word mindful can do. It really, it can really be applied to anything. Just be mindful that speaking words might help Vladimir Putin. So just be mindful of that.
Yeah. We should have Tara Brock. They should have Tara Brock on the show. The woman who writes about radical acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
She does a lot of videos about mindfulness, meditation. Don't react. RAIN, it's called. Reaction, anger. I can't remember, but it's a good acronym. I guess it's not that good if I can't remember it, but
I'm sure it's a great acronym.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great lesson in mindfulness from Face the Nation. So thank you. Thank you, Face the Nation. And, speaking of mindfulness, we need some mindfulness right now, because according to Adam Schiff, the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, things right now with Russia are looking pretty bleak. And his response to that could be seen as an act of mindfulness, I suppose. So let's hear what Adam Schiff has to say.
There's a long history of this, of these kind of private communications to keep the lines open, to make sure that we don't get into a direct shooting war with Russia, that we don't get into some kind of a nuclear confrontation. We are lucky to have Bill Burns, who is a career diplomat, who happens to be the head of the CIA now, engage in those kind of discussions. So I do think they can be very valuable.
Do you think the risk of direct conflict is growing?
I think it is growing. I think it is manageable, and I think the Biden administration has done a remarkable job in managing that and not letting it get out of hand. But you see Putin continue to rattle the nuclear saber, which is extremely dangerous. It can't deter us, though, from giving our full and complete support to Ukraine. They are fighting valiantly, and democracy itself, I think, is the cost of this struggle.
So, yes, the threat of confrontation with Russia is growing. But let's continue full steam ahead. Let's just keep growing it. Why not? Because that's the cost of fighting for freedom and democracy.
Freedom, right.
That's Adam Schiff's message.
But I feel bad because his whole point with well, okay, does that mean it's consistent with his desire to fight Russia over there instead of fighting them over here?
It's very consistent because the fight is still over there.
Right.
That's when he said on the House floor a few years ago that the U.S. aids Ukraine so that we can fight Russia over there and we don't have to fight them here. And so far, look, yes, the risk of confrontation is growing, but we're still not fighting them here.
Right.
So full steam ahead.
Right. Okay. So we don't have to feel bad for him yet because he's still able to do the proxy war. Got it. Okay.
And by the way, what he says about Russia's nuclear saber rattling it's just not true. Russia's reiterated its nuclear doctrine, which is that it will use nuclear weapons and respond either in response to nuclear weapons used against Russia or against an existential threat of against Russia. And Putin also said recently that there's no need for us to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. Now, meanwhile, Biden, after campaigning on a pledge to have a new nuclear policy of basically no first use, he backtracked on that and basically kept up the traditional policy of pledging to use nuclear weapons if the U.S. deems that to be in its interest, which is the U.S. saying that we will start a nuclear war if we think it's in our interest. And so that's actually the state of nuclear saber rattling right now between these two countries.
No one ever corrects that, though.
No, of course not. No. Okay, so up next, well, look, we've heard the insights of Adam Schiff on the Ukraine war. Who wants to hear from J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon, a billionaire who's overseen a company that's been involved in multiple criminal allegations and fraud, and but he's got some thoughts about Ukraine. So why not give him the mic?
The moment we are in feels like a transition point, an inflection point, and I wonder how you think about where America is at this moment.
America is the most prosperous nation the world's ever seen. Our basic principles of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, are unbelievable. The innovation is unparalleled anywhere around the world. So start with that. It's an amazing position of strength. The economy is going through a bunch of things, and we don't always really know whether you have a mild recession or hard recession. And if it happens, we're going to be fine. I feel terrible for people who lose jobs. We want to keep it as short as possible. I do think you're right about a turning point, but that turning point is about geopolitics. That's about Ukraine, oil, Russia, war, migration, food, national security, China, trade, that whole bucket of things. And I'd put
flowers, puppies,
rainbows,
cinnamon, sugar. I mean, like that's a big bucket.
Tasty bucket.
Yeah. Like, what is he talking about? Like, what's his point? Refugees, war, oil. It's like it's just a bunch of. He's just throwing out a bunch of things.
Throwing a bunch of stuff into a bucket.
Yeah. Big bucket.
Put in that category quantitative tightening, which is basically reducing liquidity in the banking system of the world. That is actually, forget us for a second, could be very difficult, high dollar, the dollar going up, higher rates, and quantitative tightening on smaller countries around the world.
The World Bank and the IMF have been warning about this for a while.
And so I'm saying you got to put that whole mix in what's happening in geopolitics. Ukraine is a turning point where, maybe all this illusion that we had that somehow the world's at peace and everything can be fine, that should have been shattered. And therefore, we should be thinking about how can America do great in the next 100 years? What policies should we have?
Let's think about it, everybody. As we teeter on the edge of a nuclear conflict, as Adam Schiff warns, the threat of direct confrontation with Russia is growing. Let's think about how America can be great in 100 years. How about we think about how to keep the world around for at least another year when we're consciously stoking the threat of nuclear confrontation? How about that? I don't know. That's my idea.
You want people to be mindful, practice mindfulness.
Let's be mindful about the threat of nuclear war. Yes. And all the people that could be saved if we push for diplomacy now in Ukraine, rather than sending in tens of billions of dollars more in weapons. I don't know. Just throwing it out there.
Thought. Well, and by the way, it's Rain, which I brought up, Tara Brock, because she encourages mindfulness. Rain is recognize, allow, investigate, nurture.
Okay.
So we should do all those things when it comes to nuclear war. By the way, do you know what Jamie Dimon's real family's last name is? His grandfather changed the last name.
No, I don't.
Papa Demetriou.
Is that Greek?
Oh yes.
Okay. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah. Ochi. Yes, it is. Yeah. It's nice that he's Greek. I'm relieved he's not Jewish. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always a good thing.
Yeah, it's always
a good thing. All right. Well, look, we got more from Jamie whatever his original last name is.
Papadopoulos, we might as well call him. Yeah.
And let's hear his thoughts on the midterm elections.
Oh yeah, this is good.
Ed said in this country you were happy about the midterm results.
On both parties, the wingnuts didn't get elected. And so the rational thing, when I was just in Congress, I was gratified by the thought they want to make progress. And I think they can make progress.
So the wingnuts didn't get in.
The wingnuts on both sides didn't get in. Yes, I don't know who he's talking about on the left.
Yeah, who are the left wingnuts? I love that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I would vote for them, whoever they are.
Right. Yeah.
It's both sides. Wingnuts on both sides.
Wingnuts on both sides. Yeah.
Is there more from this clip? I think so. Or no? Looks like Wilson. Is that clip done?
Yeah, that was a quick one. That was the whole thing, just the wingnuts thing.
Yeah. Well, I just, it's so funny. Like, Russia has oligarchs, right? We have to defeat the oligarchs. Here, our oligarchs have to be given friendly interviews on TV and ask their political opinions. But, that's because they're good oligarchs. They have the right opinions, and they're against wingnuts.
Yeah, it's so stupid. I hate, the whole the both sidesism is ridiculous. As if we have people on the left who are as far from the center as the people on the right in office. I wish that were true.
It reminds me of that Kid Rock song, where you remember when Jon Stewart. This is a really also, I think, low moment in Jon Stewart's really impressive career. But I think the peak low moment was the one we covered recently when he interviewed Hillary Clinton and Condoleezza Rice and let them spew all this pro-war propaganda that he once challenged. But another low point was when he did that rally, like the rally to restore sanity. And the theme of it was basically like that both sides are crazy. And Kid Rock, remember Kid Rock, who's like a right-wing rock artist. He performed a song, and one of the lyrics, and it was about how like the center needs to like take control, and the lyrics were like something on the left, something on the right. I'm just trying to live my life, or something like that. It was like screamer. It's like at both sides, like the right and the left were all just like loud. And so Kid Rock is trying to live his life. Everybody.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, that song "Picture" is pretty good. That duet he did with Sheryl Crow.
I don't remember that one.
I put your picture away, sat down and cried today. I just called to say I want you to come back home. It's good.
Yeah, I missed that one.
You're gonna have to take my word for it.
I missed that. Yeah.
Take my word on it. Yeah. Well, clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you.
Yeah, really. So Kid Rock ripped off that song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of middling going on. Straight out of the American playbook.
Here are the lyrics. It's from Kid Rock's song. It's called "Care." It's from his album "Born Free," and he says, screaming on the left, yelling on the right. I'm sitting in the middle trying to live my life. Because I can't stop the war, shelter homeless, feed the poor. I can't walk on water. I can't save your sons and daughters. Well, I can't change the world to make things fair. The least I can do is care. That's really touching. That's really touching. So, yeah. He compares walking on water to sheltering the homeless and feeding the poor. I think probably one is more realistic than the other.
Right.
I don't think you can walk on water, but I think you might be able to shelter the homeless, feed the poor if you just maybe put some resources into it, not into funding war. I don't know.
Right. Although Jesus, I think, did all those things, right?
Jesus did, yes. So, but it's basically what K Rock's saying is he's not Jesus, which is a really profound message.
Yeah, it is.
Because the jury was out,
right?
But also, like, the jury was out. I mean, people were wondering if that really was Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay. And I just realized I was arguing with a Kid Rock lyric, and that, that happens sometimes.
No, most people wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
That's why you come to Useful Idiots, guys. Yeah. How are we doing on the likes, by the way?
I see we just crossed 600.
All right, let's get up to 800, guys.
Yeah, people, we need to do better. Have you noticed the sex bot and the CIA bots haven't come in a while? I think they're thinking that we haven't been doing that well.
Yeah.
With likes.
I mean, how do you not like something like how many political shows do exegesis of Kid Rock? It's a good question. Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah. I don't believe that many of you guys there can't be that many hate watchers.
We just crossed the halfway, 7:30.
All right.
Maybe she'll come.
It's so effortless, guys. It's just a boop. You just hit a little thing. Yeah. We watch these shows. That's the real pain. How are we doing now?
763, 777. All right, people are rolling now. Great job, everyone.
All right, thanks for rallying.
Yeah.
All right, remember January 6th?
How can I forget?
We're almost approaching the anniversary of January 6th. This will be the 2-year anniversary, and I'm sure we're going to hear about it nonstop. But the January 6th committee is wrapping up, and remember, this was the biggest deal in politics for a long time, and now, of course, like everything to do with Trump, it has a certain shelf life when we move on to the next, scandal of the day. But the January 6th has made some criminal referrals to the Justice Department. So let's see Preet Bharara, his take on that.
The 6th committee is likely to issue some criminal referrals to justice, they say. Without getting, we don't want to prejudge that, but of the committee, what you saw and what the committee has produced, do you think they've made their case against Donald Trump?
Well, look, it is not their role to make a criminal case, although they're making the referral. And, I guess people can debate what the value and virtue is of making a criminal referral.
I can argue both sides of that, good or bad, right?
I mean, to me, it's largely symbolic because at the time we first started having this debate about a referral, it wasn't clear how far along the Justice Department was. Since then, the Justice Department has appointed a special counsel, as we mentioned, and they have a lot of staff that they've added to the matter, and they're far along, and they've issued subpoenas that we've heard reports about. So they're investigating this thing anyway. So what additional?
Do you think a criminal referral actually complicates things more than it helps?
I don't think it complicates things. I don't think it does. I actually don't think it does anything for the Justice Department. I don't think it prompts them to do anything more quickly or more aggressively.
But it doesn't add negatively to the political stew? The word you don't want to use?
You could argue that. I don't know. I don't know why they feel the need to do it. I think they want to make a statement for themselves. I think it has no impact on the Justice Department whatsoever.
I'd love to hear why Preet Bharara doesn't like the word stew. Does he not like stew? Does it trigger him for some reason? I don't know. That's interesting.
I like
more interesting than January 6th to me.
Right.
But look, I hate to brag here, but what Preet Bharara is saying is exactly what I've been trying to say for the last year, that no matter what the committee does, it doesn't matter, because it's the Justice Department that has real, criminal and prosecutorial power, and they're the ones doing the investigation. That's the one that matters. So the January 6th committee was basically, as I think Preet Bharara is acknowledging here, just for show.
Right.
Just to keep this issue in the news and give a spectacle for establishment TV to air, even though only a small segment of the population really cares about it. But he's right. Like, if there's a case to be made, the Justice Department will make it. And no matter what Adam Schiff and Liz Cheney do publicly, it doesn't matter to that, because ultimately it's not them that are conducting the investigation that will lead to any prosecutions.
Right. But I mean, again, what it does bring is great showmanship.
Yes, and great PR for Liz Cheney's 2024 presidential run as a Democrat.
Yeah.
And in fact, the Washington Post recently reported that members of the committee are upset because they feel as if Liz Cheney has kept it has shaped the committee in her own political interests. So congratulations to everybody who played into the January 6th committee and gave it nonstop attention, because it was so obvious from the start that this was in part an effort to basically continue the ascent of neocons like Liz Cheney in the Democratic Party and normalize their political agenda and set them up for a presidential run like I think Liz Cheney will do, or some sort of presidential future that involves co-opting Democrats even more.
I don't know. I don't buy it that a Cheney member, a member of the Cheney family, does anything opportunistic. They're such good public servants.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah. Imagine that. Yes. Yeah. Yes. All right. Well, look. So
should we keep going with January 6th? Because do we want to do those clips and skip over or do we want to do?
We can go on to other stories, and we can return to January 6th if we have time.
All right.
I think that's enough. January 6th.
We got some Twitter files news. And by the way, make sure that you subscribe to our Substack, to usefulidiots.substack.com, because we did a little bit of a deep dive into the Twitter files on our Thursday Throwdown, which is a special feature that is exclusive for our Substack subscribers. But we're going to give you a little bit of a Twitter files clip right now.
Thank you for doing what you did. The entire country thanks you. What prompted you to write that note to the leadership of Twitter?
Thank you, Maria, but I don't think what I did was anything exceptional. I was just standing up for our Constitution.
Okay, we should set this up, right? Because people may not know. But basically, in the Twitter files, something that was revealed was Ro Khanna expressing some concern about the way that there was maybe some censorship on Twitter.
For our First Amendment, it is wrong to censor newspapers. It is wrong to censor journalists. Look, the New York Post hasn't written a kind thing about me in my 6 years in Congress. They're a conservative point of view paper. But that doesn't mean that you can stop publishing their pieces or articles or censor their journalists from sharing stories. So it just offended the basic principles that our country is based on.
And those principles have been broken over the last few years. Congressman, I want to get your take on the road ahead. What do you want to see to ensure that America's freedom and liberties stay in place?
Well, I've said I'm open to hearings in Congress on this. Look, there are two competing values. On the one hand, we don't want censorship. We don't want to have people censored or boxed out, shadow boxed, and removed from Twitter because of their viewpoint. On the other hand, we do want respect. I mean, we don't want accounts that are filled with anti-Semitism or just spewing racism or hate on these accounts. And I think Congress should have a honest, thoughtful conversation about how we uphold both of those values.
So hearings would be good, talking about how this took place to ensure it doesn't happen again. Do you believe this can get better? Can we take the politicization out of federal agencies as well as the media?
I do, Maria, because I think if we want any hope of coming together as a country, the first thing we have to do is say people should be able to express their view. We can't tell people who we disagree with, please just be silenced. We don't want to hear you. We don't want to engage with you. Let me tell you, that's just going to create further polarization, further alienation. And I've been surprised how many Republicans who don't agree with a single thing I said believe, okay, at least we can have a dialogue. And that, I think, is the first step to being together as Americans. We could all.
So Ro Khanna coming out in favor of free speech and against the suppression of reporting on the Hunter Biden laptop story. And the reason this is on Fox News is because no one else on the Sunday news shows is covering this. It's only covered elsewhere with hostility because all these networks were complicit in ignoring the Hunter Biden laptop story, and going along with the suppression because some former intelligence officials said it might be Russian disinformation. So that was enough.
And unsafe.
Yeah. So that was enough to get everyone to, have a vow of silence. And now they don't care that the facts are coming out with internal Twitter files showing that actually Twitter knew they had no evidence that this was the product of Russia, but they just slapped censorship on it anyway.
Right.
And Ro Khanna, in the files is seen protesting this at the time, writing to Twitter. And so he's, he's acting out of principle here, which is very rare these days. It's so he has to go on Fox News, though, to say it because the other shows aren't covering it.
Yeah. And of course, we should point out that it's not as if Republicans care about free speech when it comes to, like Palestinians.
No. And if you look at the way the Twitter files have been rolled out so far, so they gave it to Matt Taibbi, who, of course, founder of the show and good friend. And but then they gave it to Bari Weiss. And you can't say that Bari Weiss is like a champion of free speech when she's been trying to cancel Palestinian scholars and Palestinian voices for a very, very long time.
Right,
So,
including Joseph Mossad, of course.
I mean, I think Matt is a great journalist and a great messenger for the story because he's actually been consistent in supporting free speech. I think Bari Weiss was a really poor choice because she's not a free speech champion at all. And the thing is, and it's fed into this narrative where basically, and Elon Musk said this. He said he had this comment on Twitter where he said that the censorship was happening to the right on Twitter, not to the left.
Right.
And the obvious response is, well, what do you mean by the left? If you mean the Democratic Party and their partisans in the media, sure. If that's how you define the left. What about the actual left, like progressives who are against war, who support Palestinian rights? Are you trying to tell us that there was no censorship and suppression there? I would be shocked if that was true. And the best way to remedy all this is just release all of the files and let us all decide. Because I'd just be shocked if suppression was only happening to members of the right.
Yes.
I'd be very surprised.
Well, and we know that because it constantly is. Palestinians' accounts are constantly getting shut down.
Yes, they are. Yeah, they are. And in terms of who's getting their views suppressed and all that, the implication so far is that it's only happening to the right, and I doubt it.
Right. By the way, I got an award from the American Muslims for Palestine. It's right behind me.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. Well, look, there's good news, everybody. These are bleak times, but good news. We're going to go back to Mike Pompeo.
The pomp.
Remember how excited he was about
memories of freeing people.
Memories of or trying to free people, and memories of imposing sanctions on foreign countries. At least that was our interpretation of him being giddy. But now he's got some even more exciting news about his future plans.
So about that, you're doing your part, or that you will be as part of 24. You visited all the right states. You've got a book out. You are speaking all around the country. When will you announce your intentions for 2024?
Oh, Shannon, I don't know. We're still thinking our way. We, Susan and me, my wife, are thinking our way through this, trying to figure out.
The clock is ticking.
Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but we have to make sure we get this right for America. It's not about the Pompeos. This is about getting this right for the country. We got to make sure we do that, and I'm confident that the country will get it right come 2024.
What's your timeline?
Sometime in the spring, Shannon. You'll know.
Honest.
Remember, John Bolton got the same question last week from when he was on NBC when he talked about possibly running against Trump because he despises Trump so much, even though Trump hired him like the chump he is to work in his cabinet. And the question of Bolton too, like, what's your timeline? So these neocons are really being pressed for their timeline. People want to know.
Well, let's hear a little. Let's play the end of this clip because we're getting a little preview from Shannon at least.
Sunday, right here on Fox News Sunday. All right, Mr. Secretary, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, ma'am. Have a good morning.
She's trying to box him into a corner, get him to admit that he's going to announce it on her show.
It would be so funny if both John Bolton and Mike Pompeo, who Trump appointed, ran against him. And the reason they would run against him is because they think he's a bad look for their agenda, which is to dominate the world.
Right.
and because he says the wrong things. He's out of control. He's wild. And again,
and he's also slightly less belligerent than they are.
On certain, yes,
I think he is,
yeah. On certain issues, I mean, yeah. I mean, then those two, yes. And it's just so he ran to drain the swamp, and then he appointed like the biggest swamp creatures he could find, and they're such swamp creatures that they're not even loyal to him because they think he puts a bad look on their agenda. And now they're considering running against him because they find him so annoying and so bad for their neocon agenda, which is just very, very funny.
All right, what do we got next? Should we just go back to more Schiff?
I think. Well, we can do this clip. Well, we can talk more about Ukraine.
Let's do that.
So
let's
White House,
Martha Raddatz is always a good time.
John Kirby was on ABC's This Week.
This, of course, was with the backdrop of the war in Ukraine. Give us your assessment of what's happening there now. We heard Vladimir Putin talk again about nuclear weapons, but saying, I'm not crazy, I know what nuclear weapons do. What do you believe his state of mind is at this point and what he's looking for?
It's difficult to know exactly what he's thinking on any given day, and it's a fool's errand to try to get inside that brain. What we do is we judge him by his actions. And what we see on the ground is a man who is determined to continue to prosecute this war against the Ukrainian people. Indeed, to make it more about them than it is even right now about the Ukrainian armed forces. He's hitting civilian infrastructure, knocking out the lights, knocking out the water. He's militarized the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. He is trying to bring the Ukrainian people to their knees as winter approaches, which is why just Friday, we announced even more security assistance going to the Ukrainian armed forces so that they can continue to win back their territory.
And a senior official in Zelensky's inner circle told ABC News that it was Ukrainian drones that struck airfields deep inside Russia. Is that something you think they should be doing?
I'll let the Ukrainian armed forces speak for their operations. We are not certainly not encouraging or enabling Ukrainian operations inside Russia. We are trying to make sure that they can defend their territory, win back their ground in Ukraine. And from the very beginning, Martha, we've talked about monitoring and being mindful of the risks of escalation of this war, because that's not only not good for the Ukrainian people, it's not good for our interests, it's not good for the Russian people.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I don't believe that the U.S. isn't enabling Ukrainian strikes inside Russia. There was just an article recently in the UK media saying that the U.S. has given the green light for U.S. strikes inside Russian territory. And that makes sense because the U.S. is so involved in this war and is involved in targeting and all the other fighting. And so the policy is just, look, there was talk recently of diplomacy. Mark Milley, the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, came out calling for diplomacy. But it looks like the people inside the White House who want to continue the proxy war have won out. And so we're in for even more disaster. And what he says about Russia weaponizing winter and trying to impose more suffering on the Ukrainian people, that's true. Russia has escalated its assaults on Ukrainian infrastructure. And, that's Russia's criminal liability for doing that. The question for the U.S. is, why did you do everything you could to prevent diplomacy before Russia started doing that? Right. Because Russia started doing this only recently, after there was, that reported peace deal back in April between Zelensky and Russia, which the UK, certainly acting at the behest of the US, sabotaged, and after the summer. And Russia finally started hitting infrastructure after Ukraine did things like attack the Kerch Bridge, the bridge linking Russia to Crimea. And so all this could have been avoided. It could have, or at least they could have tried to avoid it with diplomacy, but they've shunned diplomacy at every turn. And now we're in this situation, and it's looking so bleak and awful heading into winter. But that's a choice of the Biden administration. Right. They want to continue to prosecute this proxy war for as long as possible, even though they know Ukraine can't win. The aim is just to bleed Russia as much as they can.
Right. And by the way, just wanted to say I have a great interview, if I do say so myself, with Jeff Sachs about this on the Katie Halper Show.
Cool. Okay. Well, we are coming to the end of the show. Do we we have a few more clips left, but it requires listening to Adam Schiff again. I don't know.
What do we do?
Should we just wrap it here?
Yeah, let's just wrap it here and have leave people wanting more. And you know where you can get more is on our call-in that we're about to do.
Yes, we're going to start calling at the top of the hour.
Yep. So guys, grab a cup of coffee, take the time to, you could tweet it out. And we'll see you at call-in. And
we'll also see you at usefulidiots.substack.com. Go there to subscribe and get bonus content. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.